Tom Barrack, good morning.
Good morning, Ricardo.
You're an early riser. It's 7 a.m. now in Los Angeles. Are you in LA or in Aspen, actually?
No, I'm actually in Santa Barbara, but I woke early so I could have a glass of arak with you at the appropriate time.
A glass of arak in the morning is difficult, but in Lebanon, everything is possible.
It's not your morning, so I'm accommodating.
Some no meat in the morning. It happens in the mountains. I don't want to dig into your daily patterns, but how do your mornings look like usually?
I usually try and stay on European or East Coast time. I wake up at 4 or 4:30, start Zoom calls. I try and work out for an hour sometime in the middle of the morning. And as for all of us, the world fades into connectivity such as we're doing now, and the wonder of this amazing ability to talk, to exchange ideas, to transact business digitally. It's a new frontier for all of us.
We're all connected virtually. Tom, it's a pleasure to have this opportunity to sit and to talk to you, even if on a virtual level. Some 15 years ago, or some 15 years passed since our last TV encounter, and the least we can say is that the world has witnessed major changes since 2005. The Arab world has been shaken. The US have been through major events. We have lived crises in all their forms, economic, political, and health-related. We've grown old, although we haven't changed a bit. Also, the means of connecting and sharing our encounter and our thought have changed. The whole world is facing the COVID-19 pandemic. However, the United States is confronting a pandemic of another kind. This one is racial. The US have always embodied the pure dream, the bright tomorrow, the beacon of success. The American values have always been freedom and democracy. Today, those values seem to have collapsed with a contrasting picture of everything we believed in and aspired for in our daily lives. Today, when we open our eyes and look at what is happening, we see America through the eyes of Black people. Do you feel that pain?
Absolutely. There is no excuse for the amazingly sad and terrifying situation that we're confronting in America. Black Lives Matter, slavery, the concept existed since the 1600s. And the fact that we in America are still suffering from prejudice, from a point of view on the part of a few, sometimes many, that relates to race, religion, color, points of view is unacceptable. Everything happens when it's supposed to happen. So the incredible events of George Floyd, which have now been a spark around the world for a point of view of, does democracy work? Is America the leader? Do we have the right frame of mind? What is the difference, not just between the blacks and the whites, but people of color in general? What is the difference between the haves and the have-nots, which is a subcategory of what we're talking about, is unacceptable in a country of the wealth and dominance of the United States. And the diversity of what goes on can only be explained through action and activity of its people. And that's what you're seeing now. So the worst side of America is the fracturization between blacks and whites, and a less category between haves and have-nots or people of color, since we're all immigrants, right? The pattern of who we are in America is always from someplace else. But the inbred difficulty of blacks, especially American blacks, who came out of a slavery background, that we have not solved this problem is unacceptable. But the beauty of America is that in the streets of every city in America, of the streets of every country in the world. The focus, the attention of fixing this problem is happening, and it's happening in the manner that it should. So peaceful protests all over America is a great commentary on the system. Looting, anger, robbery is unacceptable. The rule of law is being applied, but the rule of law is being questioned. So abuse of power everywhere, and we'll go into it in the Middle East and Lebanon, and people are fed up with the abuse of power. But in a category of 4.5 billion people, or in America approaching 300 million people, this democratic process of melding interests, of taking care of those who need to be taken care of having a runway that's equal for everybody is amazingly complex. And sometimes it takes extreme action. And extreme action is what we're undergoing now.
Last time we spoke, you told me you had inside of you the adaptability and the flexibility that make up the Lebanese DNA. You were born on the lucky side of immigration. Had you been from African descent or Latino mother, you think your life would have been what it is today?
You know, I have no idea. I wake up every morning and thank Almighty God for the privilege of having Lebanese DNA, that Hanun, that adaptability that we've talked about before, and the privilege of having it displayed in a country like America, where as an immigrant, my parents, their parents, your parents can come to a country that doesn't understand what we eat, who we are, what the color of our skin is, where we've been, and give an opportunity to achieve whatever level of success or peace of mind that you like. I don't think that was available to blacks or African Americans as a result of actually the culture and the history of America. So yes, all of us of immigrants, Italians, Irish, Lebanese, are gifted by having this amazing tapestry of America, which has all the multiplicity of cultural threads. But blacks specifically, because of the cultural orientation of what America was during slavery, have a particularly difficult test. And it's just unacceptable in the year 2020 to have it continue.
Tom, talking about your DNA and how proud you are of holding the Lebanese genes. I remember you've told me that your father was an incredible man that lacked the financial education and discipline, but by far was the smartest man that you've ever known. He never lost his humility. He never allowed you to lose yours. And as a young man, he told you, it's really very simple. Either you are the number one smartest person in the world in what you do, and then you can survive. Otherwise, you won't. Do you think that was the recipe of your success?
I think the recipe of success was the intersection of karma, luck, the universe, and most importantly, I think what all of the Lebanese share is adaptability and drive. So just from a small place, and I don't really feel successful. I'm still striving for success, for relevance, for input. But I never had fear, right? That the Lebanese, all of you sitting in the midst of one of the worst situations ever in history in Lebanon, and we've had lots of them, right? Lebanon is the intersection of three continents, and every culture in America, from America to China, transversing that cultural gap, has learned that the key to survival is you adapt. And fear is the difficult aspect of ever adapting. So I never had fear. We came from a very modest place. My mother and father were unbelievably simple, except when it came to integrity, character, drive, commitment. And it wasn't about money, and it wasn't about success. It was about who you are as a person. And I adapted at an early stage to a framework of saying I didn't mind pain. I could work harder than most people. I could accept rejection well in most circumstances. And I wake up every morning and fight. And I think that was the key to whatever tiny modicum of success I may have had along the way. It's every morning a gazelle wakes up in Africa and knows one thing. It needs to run faster than the fastest lion in the jungle. And the lion wakes up every day and knows one thing. He has to run faster than the slowest gazelle. But whether you're a lion or a gazelle, you better wake up and run like hell. And I think that's the key to survival.
The USA is not the only country to face a crisis or a leadership crisis today. Protests have been growing louder and stronger around the world. The Arab Spring blew over the region at the start of the decade, Latin America, Asia, and Lebanon, of course. And I'd love to talk about Lebanon. What are Washington's actual views on what's happening in Beirut? Who is sitting at this table, and what are the regional aspirations at play?
Firstly, I can't give you a summary of what Washington's view is. I'm an individual. I'm a private citizen. So let me give you just one Lebanese American's point of view of what's happening. Is Little Lebanon is one tiny thread in an unbelievably complex tapestry. And that tapestry of the Middle East, that tapestry of what is an Arab in America is terribly confused. And by the way, it's always been terribly confused. So we now have been through 2 presidential cycles, great presidents. President Obama, I have great respect for him. I loved him at the time. I voted for him at the time of his election, who had one very distinctive and separate view of what America's influence or prestige was in the Middle East. President Trump, as you know, is a very close friend. I have unbelievable confidence and admiration for him. And he had a totally different view of what should go on in the Middle East. And when we talk about the Middle East, as we know, the tribes and flags drama for hundreds of years has been agony for anybody outside to try and understand, especially going from the Sykes-Picot Treaty and trying to understand the alliance, interference, control of nation states outside of the region. And this has always been the problem. So we have a regional framework in which Little Lebanon has always been a steward, a mentor, a guide through a very complex Shia, Sunni, Druze, Maronite, Africa, Asia, Europe scenario, and connected those very well. So Lebanon sitting in a very complex situation. Iraq, Syria, Libya, Yemen, controversies with Iran, Saudi Arabia, Russia, Turkey, to the American mind are amazingly complex. So historically, what was the interest? Bottom line, historically, the interest always of Western powers was to interfere in the Middle East for the purposes of extracting black gold, oil and gas. I mean, this is the bottom line, and I call it catch and release. So, of course, the U.S. supported authoritarian regimes, monarchies, which by necessity worked. But they didn't do that for the benefit of the local people. They did that, as all Western powers did, for the predictability of the flow of oil and gas to the other parts of the world who had this unquenchable thirst for it. And during that process, Little Lebanon, which was the Western steward or concierge, between the Gulf states, who had the benefit and the privilege of having that black gold, and the consuming nations everywhere, which the Lebanese had this talent and ability to be merchants and middlemen in almost everything that transacted. So America's view of Lebanon and what's gone on in Lebanon is just one thread and a very confusing story to them of the Middle East. And Lebanon as an illusion, as a thought, as a hope or an ideal is something that's drifting in their minds. But I can tell you most Americans have zero idea of the dilemma and the politics that go on within Little Lebanon, nor do they really in the Arab world. So from a political point of view, the administration, have you seen this administration, President Trump? I mean, think about it. Here you have a president of the United States who comes in who has very little foreign experience.
You know, on which ideology does the USA base its decisions when it chooses on whether to lend a helping hand or impose sanctions on a country? Is it out of political interest? Is it out of pure ideology? And beyond abstract ideas and ideals, today the situation in Lebanon is dire. The country is collapsing. What do you think is in store for this small country?
Lebanon is a tiny speck in an unbelievably complicated political dilemma. And when you say, how are sanctions applied? The first thing that happened because of sanctions was a response to terrorism. So we go back to the beginning of ISIS or Al-Qaeda or 9/11 and what from an American point of view, and I'm just giving you my personal point of view. I'm certainly not astute enough to share what the president or Congress's view of all of this is, but I can tell you how that fabric developed. So if you remember at the beginning, one of the first acts that this president had was a Muslim ban. So we go from a Muslim ban with a desire of all America wanted to do is return to protectionism in a way, right? This idea of building walls in America, who ever heard of it? America is this open fabric where every culture can enter. And the first thing that happened was to start building these barriers, and one of those barriers was the Muslim ban. Now go from the Muslim ban, which starts in January of 2017, to the President of the United States in his first trip ever in history, getting off an airplane in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, met by the king and 53 Arab countries as his first trip, creating a new fabric of what American policy was going to be in the Middle East. And I'm coming to your answer in Lebanon. Now remember, Obama's philosophy of what was in the Middle East was totally different. So we don't have to go through the litany of horribles with the Muslim Brotherhood and what his position was with Iran and what the nuclear deal was going to be and what happened in Iraq and what happened in Syria and the neglect of what the Israelis thought was no attention to them and the continuing dilemma of the Israeli-Palestinian controversy. President Trump came in with a different point of view, and quickly you had the first American-Arab conference in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, which started a new fabric. And that fabric was Saudi Arabia and UAE supported, MBZ and MBS being vibrant new leaders in the region with a point of view that the administration embraced, in hand with El-Sisi in Egypt and the Israelis in trying to come up with this balance, anti-Iranian, because Iranian viewed as this blend between a state and revolutionaries. They had to choose one or the other. Are you a state or are you a revolution? And Hezbollah and the input of all the things that we know across the region. So Lebanon, I can tell you, that the fabric of the American Congress, the American president, all the parties that have ever touched the beauty and the heart of this tiny little country in the middle of a quagmire of confusion, their heart and their intent is there, but there are so many external factors that are at the very essence of Lebanon that it's a delicate matter. So the ability for the United States on any basis to intervene in Lebanon today, to intervene in Yemen today, to intervene in Syria today, to intervene in Libya today, to intervene in Israel and Palestine today, are becoming more limited because the question is at what cost and what is the benefit? So it's a really, really difficult time. And at the same time, in each of the countries, right, we little Lebanon have this beautiful, amazing oasis in the middle of a really tough neighborhood, right? I mean, there's no tougher neighborhood with neighbors on all sides who still have tribes and flags disagreement. So, will the IMF help Lebanon? I'm sure the IMF will help Lebanon. The question is, will Lebanon do what the IMF is asking? And as we know, the answer is probably not. And we talked about all of the other dilemmas in Lebanon. The sanctions against Iran. This is another topic we could talk for 5 hours about. Is this a good thing? Is it a bad thing? How long does it continue? What's the point? Exactly the issue that you arose.
Let me take some of the questions of the audience. Rifat Qaz'oun asks you, how does the U.S. administration look at the domination of Hezbollah over Lebanon? This has started in 2000 and continues to strengthen every year. The moderate Lebanese people simply feel betrayed, abandoned, and left alone. What does your say about that?
I understand the feeling because America's foreign policy with Lebanon and the Middle East has been inconsistent over many administrations, and this is part of the problem. I can't tell you how the administration feels about that particular issue in Lebanon, but as you know, the U.S. administration has leveled unbelievable sanctions against Iran, the sponsor of Hezbollah, views Hezbollah as a terrorist organization, not as a political party. Whether it is or it isn't is another issue that's way beyond my pay grade. And the regional issue of Hezbollah as a component within Lebanon and a political active participant in the community is beyond the reach of foreign policy at the moment. So I think what you see happening around you is a detachment from Iran, an isolation of Iran through sanctions, which has worked. If the goal were to put them in a difficult situation, certainly that happened. A depletion of oil prices added more pressure. Now, little Lebanon is in the heart of feeling that pressure. Is that a good thing or a bad thing for Lebanon? I can't tell you. But the response of the American regime has been anti-Iranian. And what we've seen is steps coming back from another point of view of saying maybe what America needs to do, what the rest of the great leaders in the Middle East need to do, Kuwait, UAE, Saudi Arabia, is to find a palette to have a diplomatic conversation with Iran at some point in time and put this behind us. That's ultimately the solution. You can't switch from Shia to Sunni every afternoon. You can't have the Maronites and the Druze in the middle of all of this. And you can't have Hezbollah, who's now unfunded by the Iranians, in the middle of an Iranian-Palestinian deal of the century, which seems to not be gaining ground. And meanwhile, you have 90 million Egyptians who are below the poverty line with no hope. We have a youth bulge across the Middle East, which is the next gigantic problem. I mean, when I talk to my friends and they say, why should we care about the Middle East? We love hummus, we love tabbouleh, we love kibbeh, but what do we care? We're oil independent now in the U.S. We don't need anybody else. Why do we care? And I said, well, you better care, because you're going to have 250 million kids across the landscape of the Middle East who have no hope, who have no direction, who have no understanding, who are switching from a nation state to a digital nation state and see everything happening now on Instagram, on TikTok, on Facebook. They know what's happening in the world, and they're going to be sitting in your living room. If you do not help them find a path through it, and that includes helping these young leaders who are fighting centuries of dynastic leadership from another place with a Western policy that was not helping them. I call it catch and release. Whether it was the Brits or the Americans across the Gulf states, it's not the Gulf states that were causing the problems. It was our interference with them and their leaders supporting monarchies and then letting those monarchies go for another monarchy. So it's an unbelievably difficult time, and Lebanon is trapped in the middle of this unbelievably complex tapestry, but it's not being viewed independently. Lebanon first has to help itself, and it's what we do the worst, right? I'm an advocate of saying you have 20 million Lebanese outside of the country, and thanks to all of you, thanks to this complex civilization and DNA, they're smart, they're aggressive, they're influential in most places, and they're not subject to the bureaucracy. I don't call it corruption in Lebanon, because what happened in Lebanon for this bureaucracy to exist between so many sectarian and religious groups was you had to find a balance. You had to find a balance between the Shias and the Sunnis and the Maronites and the Druze, and everybody had to take their little piece of the puzzle. And by the way, the Lebanese are so good, they didn't really care what happened there because most of their wealth was being created outside of the country. Then when things start collapsing, we all complain and say, well, somebody's got to come and help us. But we first have to help ourselves. And part of that is not getting rid of the corruption, getting rid of the bureaucracy, right? If you just took one step back, there's no more beautiful country in the world. You come to Lebanon, you have this soul, you have this heart, you have an ancient civilization, you have hospitality, you have it all. And anything you want, you can find. Yet we're the worst touristic venue in the world. We have no security. You can't get into the airport. Everybody's walking around packing .357 Magnums. You have the militias everywhere on one side or the other, which creates this beautiful tension, but it's ours to solve. And I don't think anybody can help except what's happening now. And it's rugged and it's tough, but people are going to have to make sacrifices, including the bureaucracies or the militias or the political regime and the people.
I have a question from Sarah Khalifa. She's asking you, will you still vote for Trump in light of his terrible handling of the COVID-19 virus and lack of empathy in general towards minorities?
Look, it's not easy to be president of the United States. I don't agree with many of the presentation policies of President Trump. I think he's done as good a job as anybody could do on very complicated matters, and COVID-19 being included in that. So, yes, I would vote for him. I think America is a beneficiary of even this dilemma of the debate. A country in which you can have this open debate and defiance against the president, the administration, all the pieces of the puzzle, is a great country. We don't have all the right answers. The president alienates a lot of groups, which, in my opinion, are alienated because of the manner in which he's presented, that unempathetic tone, which disturbs a lot of people. In spite of that, which I don't agree with all the time, I think he's done a great job across a very difficult tapestry.
You have decided to play a pivotal role in the campaign of Donald Trump. You had a key role in the Reagan's campaign, and you served in his administration as well. Your choice of backing up presidents who are not obviously the ultimate people's choice or candidates. One's coming from the entertainment world, another one's coming from the real estate world. You have been behind Trump's links to the Arab ruling families. How were you able to manage to present him as a possible ally for the Arab region, despite all the controversy that surrounded him?
So first of all, with President Reagan, the reason I backed him is he's a cowboy. I love cowboys. It was perfect, and he's one of the greatest presidents ever. And by the way, I'm not actively involved in President Trump's campaign, but let me tell you why I was. And of course, my introduction to the Arab leaders is I'm a fan. I'm a great advocate of what's going on in most of these progressive countries, and I had the privilege of knowing many of the leaders and knowing their fathers. And President Trump, when he came into office, did not have a pre-existing relationship. So in some small way, I thought I could contribute by making those introductions and having a president that had a clean canvas, right? He didn't come into office with a preconditioned view of the Middle East. And of course, many of the leaders in the Middle East had felt that they had been left abandoned during President Obama's tenure with a lack of attention. So it was a perfect opportunity to introduce and create a dialogue. And I have to say the Arab leaders did a great job, respectfully, slowly, and President Trump and his administration picked up on what they wanted to accomplish, which was primarily a realignment with Israel in an effort to have an Israeli-Palestinian solution. And the complexity then enters into the situation. But I think the way they have all dealt with themselves up until now has been honorable and productive, and as always in the Middle East, terribly complex.
What part of you is truly Arab?
I actually think most parts of me. My heart, I would say, probably more than anything, and I'm still learning. Right? My father used to say when I first went back to Lebanon, I had this conversation with you before when I went back, and I said, well, I'm going to my homeland. He said, well, you're Lebanese, but you're not really Lebanese. You have to learn how to be Lebanese. And a lot of that was true in character and empathy and sympathy and understanding points of view and living in very complex mixed situations. So as I said, I always feel that my heart and my thoughts and maybe my moods are Lebanese and Arab, and the privilege of displaying them in a way that someone from my background or limited financial heritage would not have had an opportunity to do as a result of America.
Tom, George Floyd, irrespective of his track record, has changed the whole image of the United States. In our part of the world, in Palestine mainly, we've got thousands of George Floyd who cannot breathe and who are murdered due to American politics. Would it be one of the points you would disagree on with the Trump administration, or do you condone such policies?
I mean, first of all, obviously, I don't agree with any of that. Those lives, that dilemma, that conflict is unacceptable, and it needs to be solved. It needs to be fixed. But as we know, the outside influences on both sides have made it an impossible task. So what did the Trump administration do? Through Jared Kushner, who's a brilliant advocate of trying to find a starting point, to have a conversation, a forced conversation between the Palestinian regime and all the forces behind them and the Israeli regime and all the forces behind them, was the concept of this deal of the century. Just a starting place, a place to have a renewed diplomatic discussion with the Gulf states trying to force or convince a point of view, and with all of the other intervening countries trying to find a solution. And it hasn't worked. It's an unacceptable situation. It's a difficult solution. As we know, nobody has found a proper solution. I don't think the Trump administration, I can't speak for them, condones any of the atrocities that are done to the Palestinians or vice versa. But there's got to be the beginning of a conversation to solve this unpenetrable problem. And it's unacceptable also.
Ibrahim Debas asked you, based on the trends that you foresee in the world due to Corona-19, which three industries are you looking to invest in?
The simple answer is all things digital. So the way that in my simplistic mind I look at the world today is everything is challenged, and not just from coronavirus, right? The dilemma in the world is three things. It's the difference between the haves and the have-nots everywhere. Everywhere. This gigantic gap between those of wealth and education and those who don't have it is something we need to solve. And as the population boom and the youth bulge in the Middle East especially widens, and the difference between those employed people and unemployed widens, we have a dilemma. But the economic solution, to me, is connectivity. So what happens is, from the Treaty of Westphalia and the definition of nation states, we now go to a digital nation state. Look what's happening. You, being a great Lebanese leader of thought, have now become a great global leader of thought through fiber, connectivity, radio cell towers, microcells, data servicers, and we're all connected. And what we buy online. And what we see online. And how we entertain ourselves is online. And that effect to most industries is causing them to redefine themselves. So retail shopping centers across the world, hotels across the world, office buildings across the world. Are we ever going to go back to a situation where Amazon or Google or Facebook is going to employ their people 5 days a week inside a high-rise office building? Probably not. So as you've seen, the stock markets all over the world, the five FANGs, the large technology and digital companies are performing the best. Where we're investing as a company is across those silos, all of them. So as connectivity gets better, as the nation state starts to evaporate, right? What does a nation state provide? A currency, protection, a language, a culture. And all those things now are melding into a digital world. So young kids across the realm are playing e-games. E-games are a more popular spectator sport, even in the Middle East, than soccer, football, baseball, basketball. What are we all communicating on Zoom? What do we watch? Netflix. How do we buy? Amazon. To me, this is the future. There's arbitrage in the base industries, but I see no reason why there's not going to be tremendous deflation in the world on a temporary basis, as all central banks have intervened everywhere, right? We're living on life support everywhere. When that life support comes off, forget about the terrible effects of COVID-19. We stop the revenue of the world. How do you do this? How do you continue when you say, I'm going to stop the generation of revenue in the world and I'm going to print more money to support it in the meantime? When you pull back that money, you're going to have an issue. At the same time, you have falling oil prices all over the world. It's a dilemma. So I see a challenge in base industries, and personally, with my limited view around the world, I'm in all things digital.
Marwan Alayil asked you, a while back, you were worried about a potential collapse of the commercial real estate mortgage. Do you still think it will happen? Are we heading into another economic meltdown?
I hope not, and I think the central banks across the world are doing everything in their power to put it on life support. I think relief and rescue capital in every country coming forward is going to be an incredible opportunity. With that, there's tremendous trauma. So I don't think it's a one-size-fits-all. I think there's going to be chaos and injury in many areas, and on the other hand, it's 0% interest rates in most part of the world, which none of us can define. If there is a lender of choice at those kind of interest rates in a viable operation, it will be an opportunity to take advantage of it. So I think we have a Band-Aid on the wound. I can't tell you whether the wound is going to open again. I would imagine it will open and close several times in the next year.
Alan Griffin is asking you, how bad an economic crisis are we facing post-COVID-19? And how can the world avert a deep depression?
My personal belief is that it's a rough road ahead. I think we just have to get used to doing more for less. We've had 14 years on a global basis of upward only. We've been spoiled by the proliferation of debt everywhere. The world lives on debt. So again, I'm not sure of the answer, but I know as an individual what we need to do is be smarter, be more cautious, be willing to do much more with much less, and take care of those around us ourselves.
Fiona is asking you, do you think the US is mature enough to consider female and colored leaders, irrespective of their physical appearance, over and above their stances and policies?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it is mature enough, and we attempted. We continue to attempt. We don't do a very good job of it, right? I mean, when you think that we elected a brilliant young black president for the first time, I mean, I was so proud of America. That was an amazing event. And I think what you're seeing now is the female side of the equation is very near. You know, probably if you ran Michelle Obama today, you would have probably a landslide election of a woman if that happened today. So the American mentality, I think, is dealing with all of these issues. And at the same time, beneath that, this George Floyd issue of saying, but at the heart of this liberal interpretation, we still have this cancerous prejudice deep inside of the system. How can they coexist? How can they coexist? So I think, and I'm hopeful that what comes out of this on a global basis is this re-examination of prejudice, of points of view, of having a stable tarmac for everybody, starting with Black Lives Do Matter. Fix that first and let the world watch us. The U.S. has always been, as you started with, the point of view of everybody aspiring in some third world country of saying, this is what I want. Democracy. I want a Ford Mustang. I want to be able to live that life. I want to be on a beach in Malibu. And it's dissipating. People are frustrated. They're looking at America saying, what a failed experiment. And we need to take responsibility for that. It has been a failed experience. Our infrastructure is old. We have a health system that doesn't work. We have an education system that's not fair. We have a gigantic disparity between the haves and the have-nots everywhere, and we need to fix it. We need to fix it first before we tell the rest of the world what to do. And that's our challenge.
Nadim Shahadi asks you, what would change in U.S. Middle East policy in a Biden presidency?
I think the answer is that if we take Syria, Yemen, Libya, Iraq as focal points of outside influence and war, and then we take civil unrest, little Lebanon, across the realm, Egypt, Jordan, that just having a consistent policy, whatever that is, with a diplomatic undertone, which is always what the Middle East leaders have asked for, is just tell us what the program is. Tell us that you're going to be there, America, as an ally. Because if you're not, we're going to lean east. Because China, who is very smart and very astute and a gigantic consumer, the largest consumer for all of the products that we produce from the Middle East, is sitting there ready to fill that space, as is Russia on the other side. So I think this ebb and flow between who do you support? Do you support Saudi Arabia? Do you support Iran? Who are the major factors? Is China going to be more of an influence or not? It all gets remedied by, I think, having a broader point of view and saying it's time to give all that up. It's time for tribes and flags, first of all, to meld into each other. So we as Arabs have to solve it first. And you now have the great leaders that can actually do it. And over time, they will do it. So this idea of adversariness within the region has to stop to have the world have a different point of view. There is no Arab. There is no Middle East. As we know, there's 52 countries, and within the 52 countries, there's 150 tribal sects. Until we have a fabric that allows the world to see a different view, the beautiful view of the heart of the Arab, which we do a terrible job of presenting to the rest of the world. We do a terrible job. It's going to be a difficult road. It has to start with us. It has to start with the Arabs.
Tom, Eva Haddad is asking you, where do you see the US-Chinese relations? And what about the Chinese leadership status in the world?
We've done business in China for 40 years. They are so good. They're so tough. They're so smart. And President Xi is a leader for life. There's a big advantage of that, right? When you have 1.5 billion people and you are the singular point of making a decision on a dime, you can be terribly effective. And the U.S.-China relationship has to coexist. It does have to coexist. I don't envision a U.S.-China outward battle more than these trade issues along the edge. But China is a viable option. And China is, for the Middle East, a great option and solution for Eastern interference. So the U.S. for years took advantage of shipping its technology to China, having things produced at a very inexpensive price, buying it back so that it could then sell those products at an inexpensive price to its population, and in turn China bought our debt. As all populations expand, that relationship changes, and we accuse them of taking advantage of us. They accuse us of taking advantage of them, and you have two gigantic economic powers competing around the world for viability. I think that's a good thing. I don't think that will be a military confrontation. I think it's a battle for minds. It's a battle for relevancy to other countries, including those countries in the Middle East. I think Saudi Arabia's greatest consumer of oil today is China. So the U.S. has to be aggressive in its friendship, consistent in its alliance, productive in supporting the countries around it, and not protectionist. One of the greatest fears to me is not of China. It's of this protectionist rise within the confines of America and a deterioration of globalism. There's no other solution than globalization. We've got to be concerned. It's not let's make America great. It's let's make America greater and the world even better. That has to be the framework. Without that, we're lost.
Humor Shiam is asking you, what is the future of oil prices in the short term and the impact as an accelerator to recession along with COVID-19? Do you see if we can avert it in some way?
I think the recent oil issues were political at heart. I have great faith in MBS and the Saudi regime. I have great faith in America's ability to find fracking and the import of oil in sync, everybody knowing that there's a necessity to have oil above $50 in the world. And I think it will return more quickly than anybody thinks.
Rita Obeid, where do you see the Saudi economy in the next 2 to 5 years?
The Saudi economy is an amazing laboratory, and MBS has done an incredible job of shifting an aircraft carrier that was on a course for 1,000 miles and moving it in 3 miles. And taking care of that youthful population and an oil-based economy is no easy task, especially when the price of oil collapses in the middle of a 2030 program that is so ambitious. But I think that they have the tools to navigate properly through this quagmire. They have a sovereign wealth fund that is focused on diversifying its economy. It's got a leadership that's struggling through the ancestral fabric of a regime that has to dawn into the 23rd century and find a way to continue to grow its youthful population in a very rough neighborhood. But I think it will happen. I really believe that these young leaders, Sheikh Tamim, MBZ, MBS, the Kuwait as always a consistent and solid political machine in the middle of it, will find their way. So I'm hopeful.
Another interesting question from Nadim Shhadi. Would an American withdrawal from the Middle East start a shift away from the dollar being the global currency?
It could. I think you've seen Iran suggesting that they would sell oil for gold. But I think if you've seen in the marketplace, there's no substitute for the dollar. So as interesting that the intellectual quest could be when you just look at debt to GDP across the realm, the dollar is the currency of choice until you get to cryptocurrencies, and instead of worrying about the dollar, we're communicating with currencies the way you and I are communicating on Zoom. I don't think the dollar is going to be threatened.
If we look at Lebanon as a company that is heading towards bankruptcy with a very low employee engagement score, keeping in mind all the complexity that we have, which area would you start working on to turn around the situation?
I think the solution is for Lebanon to become Monaco. Lebanon has all the inherent characteristics of being the most hospitable, livable, desirable, safe, understandable bridge between the East and the West of any country in the world. What that takes is for all of the various parties. I mean, the way Lebanon is structured, I'm trying to be brief, but it's impossible to be brief. So we have a Maronite president. We have a Sunni prime minister. We have a very good Shia head of Congress. All of the factions, and we have the Druze on the outside who control another gigantic faction of the economy. How you unwind that and say, okay, let's go back. We need security. We need a currency. We need people to have hope and work. We need to provide a safe environment. We need to provide a safe capital environment. We had one, right? For the 21 million Lebanese outside, everybody was sending money to Lebanon. And we had a perceived system, even with those outside influences. But to me, the only answer is not oil that's in the bay in front of us. That's not going to help anything. It's how we can dismantle the machinery that's been there, that had to coexist amongst these militias, amongst these ardent political entities, when we have no electricity, when we have no fuel, when we have no stoplights, when we have no police protection, we have no food. And it's happening. You protesting what's in the street, but the politicians who are not really corrupt, I don't view them as being corrupt. They're displaying a system that was inherent for years and years. Now, can the IMF come in and say, by the way, we're going to fix it? I don't think so. I think we as Lebanese have to say enough. Just like the George Floyd situation, we're done. And the politicians have to say, we're done. In a short period of time, you could get the Lebanese diaspora to come in and say, great, you want to fix it? We'll fix it. We'll make it Monaco. But you need new regulations. You need a new economic system. You need foreign direct investment. You need a new currency system. Look, Dubai did it from nothing. They did it from nothing.
What you're stating is amazingly beautiful. However, people need to listen to tangible solutions. People in Lebanon are starving. Our money is trapped in the bank. There is poverty all over. and people have lost hope and they've lost faith. Many people are now listening to you, and you're somebody close to the administration, somebody close to the big power, to the superpower. Let's put aside, this nice and romantic way of talking about Lebanon. Do you see a solution for the Lebanese crisis today?
Look, the solution to the Lebanese crisis is you can only take advantage of the things that are at hand. There's only one possible solution that's at hand. That's the IMF. We can talk about whatever the political drama may be within the Congress of the United States to take some action. But when you say what action could they take, especially with the Hezbollah and in the middle of a political debate, it's unbelievably difficult. So to me, what is the immediate solution? The immediate solution is we're in trouble, we're drowning, we have nowhere to go. The only entity that's there to help us out of this is the IMF, and people are going to lose a lot. So this idea of the money that's in banks, it's how I look at the stock market. If you have a loss, consider it gone. You can't have regrets of the past on what's there. It's the future. You only have one entity in front of you who's giving you any answers, and that's the IMF.
The COVID-19 invaded the world. Do you think the world has taken the time to rethink its old patterns?
I think the dialogue that you're leading, for instance, as an example of these really tough, complicated issues, is we realize how interconnected we are, right? It's when we talk about contagion, we have contagion of this horrible disease, which has led to our thought of contagion of everything else, of spirit, of hope, of political methodologies, of how integrated the world is. And I think what's difficult is exactly what we're talking about for Little Lebanon, is as compassion and empathy for all of us, for everybody, expands, what are the tools to fix it? We all feel helpless. It's so big. It's so complicated. The systems are engineered with so many toggles that you don't know where to start. We as the diaspora outside should be the ones that help. The problem is we're all scared to death to help because entering that system is a quagmire in a jungle. We don't know where to start. So I think out of this virus, the interaction of a global community as a thought is a great place to be. But we have to march through the jungle with thought leaders like you saying, that's interesting. Now let's have a 10-point program of how we're going to change it, how we're going to fix it, how are we going to create empathy, how are we going to solve this dilemma of what you're confronting in Lebanon and the dilemma that everybody's confronting across the world, the abuse of power, the difference between the have and the have-nots. What is hope? Where do we go? How do we educate our kids and what kind of future they're going to have? And that can only come from a global imprint and pattern. And maybe this contagion brings us closer to doing that.
Many of us change their daily lives. What is the last random thing you learned?
Personally, what I've learned is that in the calm and the patience of an abyss, sometimes you experience the greatest excitement and thrill of the hurricane. So in these quiet, calm moments with the inability to do those things that we usually rely on, including social interaction and contact, that cultural pattern that we have with each other, you have to confront the things inside of you that may torment you the most, that may be the most difficult to overcome. And that using that time to experiment on things you would not otherwise experiment inside of yourself is a good thing. And that I think we're all finding a new way of communicating, a new way of hugging each other, and a great empathy and sympathy that we all walk in the same shoes. We all wear basically the same clothes. We all have the same hopes and aspirations. And when something like this happens, you reorder your priorities. It's all It's all less important.
How would you explain what you do for a living to a 10-year-old boy?
If you're living in a beautiful environment like Lebanon, and you grow grapes in the middle of summer and you harvest them in September and October, and you sell them in November at a huge price, that what I do is try and find grapes in March and April and sell them in June when nobody has them. That's what I would say.
Talking about the nice environment and the early rising birds, besides their morning music, which song gives you hope?
I have great hope in general, because I think that the human spirit basically is kind, is gentle.
Tom Barrack, it was such a pleasure to meet you again virtually and to have this informal chat. I'd like to thank all the people who have joined us and who have been part of this webinar. I'd like to thank my team as well. And I'd like to thank as well Silvio Tabet for helping to establish this communication today. And I'm going to give you another floor to end up this chat.
All I would say to everybody is we need to focus on those things that we can control every day in front of us, and we need to listen to those things that we can't control. But out of these horrible events, out of the George Floyd event, out of what's happening in Lebanon, it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to change. It's an opportunity to twist. It's an opportunity to reach down to where we haven't been, and we can do it. So I'm hopeful that we're going to come out of this well. It's going to be a struggle. You all do it better than anybody else, and thanks for taking the time to listen to us. And Ricardo, thank you. You're timeless. I'm so glad to be with you, and it's really been an honor and a privilege. Thank you.
It's my great pleasure. Thank you, everybody, and thank you to the National UAE, who are our partners in this weekly show. Tonight's chat. Thank you so much, and good evening.